Hello and welcome to the CNBC TV18 special broadcast. I'm Shireen Bhan. Now, last week, the Telecom Authority of India, the TRAI, slashed the interconnect usage charge on mobile-to-mobile calls by more than 50% to 6 paise per minute. Interconnect usage charge, or IUC to put it simply, is the amount paid by the telecom operator to another for facilitating voice calls for its customers on its network. The new rate will come into force from the 1st of October. Now, the incumbent telcos like Airtel, Vodafone and Idea Cellular are crying foul, terming the move disappointing, retrograde and non-transparent. Reliance Jio says the move to a zero IUC regime will benefit customers and drive the consumption of mobile services. A standard disclaimer here, Reliance Jio is part of Network 18 that owns CNBC TV18. So will the new IUC rate exacerbate problems for the incumbent telecom sector that's already reeling from a massive debt burden? Or is the telecom regulator justified in asking for an over 50% cut in the IUC rate to benefit consumers? Joining me today on this special discussion, UK Srivastava, Principal Advisor, Network, Spectrum and Licensing at the Telecom Regulator, the TRAI. Also with us on the show, Rajan Matthew, Director General of the Cellular Operators Association of India, Sanjay Kapoor, the former CEO of Bharti Airtel, and S.S. Sirohi, former member of the Telecom Commission. Mr. Upadhyay, let me start by asking you, sir, the charge that is being made against the order that's been put out by the TRAI is that it is retrograde, it is arbitrary, it is not transparent, it doesn't take into cognizance the stress that the telecom sector is faced with, and it is actually not going to benefit consumers at all. If you could respond to the charge that's being made by the incumbent operators. So I wanted to get the TRAI's perspective on this. So if I could start by asking you if you could respond to the charge that's being made by the incumbent operators that they're already dealing with a significant debt burden and that this is actually a non-transparent retrograde move. Mr. Srivastava, if you can respond to the charge that's being made by telcos.
Oh, sure. This is incorrect. This allegation is incorrect because the IUC charges has got nothing to do with the financial stress of the sector as such. IUC is the net charge that a service provider is supposed to pay to the other service provider in terms of work done principle. And there is a very scientific method of calculation of this which is followed internationally. So to say that it does not take care of the stress of the sector is not correct because it is not related. It's only paid on the work done principle. Therefore, it is totally de-linked and we don't have to consider other factors as far as the financial health of the sector is concerned. We have to focus only on how much of charge a service provider will pay to other service provider for termination of its call.
Okay, so you're saying that this has nothing to do with the stress or the lack of it as far as the telecom sector is concerned. That is not the matter that the TRAI has looked at while it has taken its decision as far as the IUC is concerned. Let me ask you then, sir, to respond to the other charge that's being made by incumbent operators, and that has to do with this business of an imbalance in traffic or asymmetric traffic. The charge is that if the traffic was symmetric, then IUC wouldn't matter, but since it is imbalanced and asymmetric, the IUC does come into effect and plays a significant role. How do you respond to that?
Look here, it is very simple. What we have done is that we have reduced the termination charge, which was prevailing at 14 paise per minute to 6 paise per minute starting from 1st of October of this year. And this will continue until 31st December of 2019. It is only from 1st January 2020 that it becomes what is called as bill and keep. Now this will become bill and keep in our view only because call charges are going down like anything. There hardly be any work done as far as termination of call is concerned. Now with the latest technologies that every service provider is introducing, what has happened is that voice has become an application which writes over data. Now the whole network is being designed for data on which the call will be terminated. Therefore, the actual cost of carrying the call will be very, very low, and therefore it is going to up to zero. And therefore, we have not done it immediately. We are doing it from 1st of January 2020. We are recognizing the fact that still there is some service asymmetry in the network, and therefore 6 paise per minute has been arrived at by very rigorous calculations, and it has been specified in our regulation.
Okay,
so this,
let me get others to...
Not correct.
Okay, let me get Rajan Matthew then to respond to that. Rajan Matthew, you've heard now from Mr. Srivastava, Principal Advisor at the TRAI, saying that, look, we have decided to move from 14 to 6 because we realize that there still is some amount of asymmetry that exists within the system, and we're only going to bill and keep from the 1st of January 2020. Also responding to the criticism that this decision has nothing to do with the financial stress that the sector is faced with, and we are now moving towards a more data-designed system, and hence voice is not really going to play that much of a role. Rajan Matthew, how do you respond to this? And also I want to check with you on whether or not the incumbents are moving court this week as is being suggested.
Yes, Shireen, I think from the best understanding that I have of the majority of the members, they've indicated that they will seek redress through judicial means. Obviously, when you say that there is no financial impact, I think that's incorrect. Whether the regulator considered the impact or not is a different situation, but to say that there is no financial impact is incorrect. Investors have already started getting very nervous about this matter. Now, coming to the situation that Mr. UK Srivastava highlighted, we have no issue with the regulator in terms of the methodology that they finally adopted. What our problem is that obviously if you use pure lyric, you're going to get the lowest number. What is the rationale? When you look through the reading that the regulator has given us, there are all these bold assertions and statements without any empirical evidence to show that adopting a pure lyric model is going to give you better migration on technology and all of this good stuff. Please also understand, Shireen, that for the last 14 to 15 years, the government has mandated the technology on all bands. To all of a sudden say that in 3 years or 2 years, we're going to have this magical switch over to VoLTE and all of this other thing is, I think, a bit of a pipe dream. So I think that's our fundamental issue, that the methodology is not the argument. The reason for the change in methodology from a Lyric Plus. And by the way, Shireen, if you go back to the discussion paper 2 years ago, when the regulator did the Lyric Plus model, it came to 14 paise. So all of a sudden, how this moved to 6 paise is a bit of a mystery.
Okay. Okay, let me get Mr. Srivastav to comment on that. Mr. Srivastav, respond to Rajan Matthew's allegation there that the methodology was changed, and for the benefit of our viewers who are watching, Lyric and Lyric Plus essentially means, to put it simply, that the cost of spectrum has been omitted from the current methodology, which is the argument that people like Rajan Matthew are making, and Lyric Plus was the earlier cost methodology that was in place. Mr. Srivastav, if you can explain to our viewers and investors why the change was made, sir.
Let me explain to you. See, this whole process of calculation of IUC charges started in 2003. And we have done this in 2003, 2006, 2009, again in 2014, 15, and now. And every time there is some, grievance of the service, a section of service providers, and they have been litigating and they have been agitating. So this happens. It is acceptable. Now, moving on to the pure lyric methodology, somebody has to read the explanatory memorandum which has been attached with the regulation. It very clearly elucidates as to why we have arrived at a certain decision. We have not done it by the jumping of gun. We have done it by proper consideration. We have explained all that in the explanatory memorandum, saying that...
What is the consideration, sir? If you can very quickly take us through why the consideration to move, sir. Yeah.
I am explaining. European Union, 26 countries have already done pure lyric. There are many other countries, we have listed them out in the explanatory memorandum, they have already moved to pure lyric. Now, network has evolved in such a way that we have to now calculate only those costs which are required to be incurred by a service provider to terminate other service providers' costs. No other cost is to be taken into consideration. And that includes also the cost of spectrum. And we have explained it in the explanatory memo. Why the cost of spectrum should not be taken. Even the UK regulator has said very clearly that it should not be taken, and we have drawn reference to this in our explanatory memorandum. There is very clear explanation to all these issues which Mr. Matthews has been raising, and I don't think if somebody makes a plain reading, he will find that there is justification in what we have done.
Okay. Mr. Sirohi, former member of the Telecom Commission, sir, if I could also get you to comment on this, and then I'll go across to Sanjay Kapoor, former CEO of Bharti Airtel, on this cost methodology model, which the incumbents claim has been changed arbitrarily. Mr. Srivastav there giving the explanation that this is the move that we're seeing globally. Globally, regulators are moving now to a pure lyric method, which means that the cost of spectrum is not being calculated. Your comments on that before I get Sanjay Kapoor to weigh in.
Yeah, I fully agree with Mr. Srivastav and the TRI's justification. Globally, there's a trend for following the pure lyric method. And there's also a trend because of the new technology inductions, the cost of networks and cost of producing a voice call has gone down very much all across. So there was a need to follow a methodology if we are going by the IUC termination charge, if you want to really implement it against the BAK, bill and keep method, where termination charge is 0.
Okay.
Although I endorse BAK only even today because India needs BAK at the moment. However, whatever regulator has done, still it is a very bold and progressive step and in the right direction. All these calculations are in tune with the requirement of today. And they're all in fair and transparent manner.
You're saying that this is in requirement. Okay, let me go across to Sanjay Kapoor. Sanjay Kapoor, you know, one argument as we've heard being explained here is the argument that Rajan Matthew has made, saying that the cost methodology has changed from the lyric method to the pure lyric method. The other argument that's also been put forward is that, look, this is in consistency with the position that the TRAI had taken in its own affidavit to the Supreme Court. Several years ago, the TRAI had said that it would move to a bill and keep regime. It would, in fact, move to a zero IUC regime, and that was meant to have happened in 2014. But then a fresh consultation paper came into effect. So, you know, there is the for argument and there is the against argument, and we've seen this back and forth on cost methodology as well as the timelines for moving to bill and keep or zero IUC. Where do you weigh in on where we stand today, Sanjay?
Shireen, this is indeed a very contentious issue. And the fact of the matter is that while we might try very hard to delineate the two issues and say that the methodology used by TRAI and the decision to be taken on IUC is completely delineated from what happens to the industry and the financial health of the industry. The fact of the matter is that me as a business person would take two steps back and say, India, I don't think should have ever expected that the IUC tariffs will begin to rise. That would have not happened, right? The only issue is that how fast they could have fallen and when could have we reached a point where there'd be a sunset date when it became zero. Now that is clear. The issue that is really bothering the whole industry is that the whole pricing regime in our country is exceedingly fallacious. We have the highest cost of raw material, which is spectrum, compared to the rest of the world. We have prices prevailing in our country, which are absolutely rock bottom. They don't get lower than this any part of the world. We give data to our customers, which is in GBs per day, which no other, even matured digital networks and 4G networks don't give in developed part of the world, but we do for some reason. And therefore, the net realization that we have is very low. In the midst of all this, what we've done is we've gone and made voice virtually perceived to be free in the market, which means rather than charging a price per voice per minute, we now have a bundled price, and therefore to even ascertain what the price of voice is very difficult. So it's now believed that it is zero, right? And that's how the consumer perceives it. In the midst of all this, when the top line of all operators is falling, when the bottom lines have got decimated to virtually zero or negative for even big operators now, the fact that the EBITDA to net debt ratios have climbed to a level where it is probably unsustainable for many to even bear the interest burden of doing the business, and then the piling debt of the industry, and then this particular issue. So I think this issue is pinching the industry more than what it should have because of all these issues that pertain. And my own take is that one, IUC can't solve the economic problem of the country or the operators or the industry. This can be solved by taking much bigger decisions. But suppose I was to believe as a
you're saying that...
Suppose I was to believe as a businessman that this is to stay, even after the challenge that the industry is making towards this, regulation, I would say it is time for the industry now to say, if this is going to happen, then what are the options we have in front of us? What are the technological advancements we need to make? What are the changes we need to bring about in our networks and consumer experience? The fact of the matter, Shireen, is that we run 3 technologies with most operators, 2G, 3G, 4G. I think some sunset decisions have to be taken over there. And the fact is that no matter what, if the industry is not going to have enough money in their hands to plow back in the consumer experience, the guys who are going to suffer are you and me. We are going to get pathetic data and pathetic voice experience. Indoor is missing. I mean, the whole fiber
you make several valid points there, Sanjay Kapoor, and we will address each one of those. But we need to take a quick break. When we return on this big debate, we'll continue with that conversation. Stay with us. We're back in a minute.